Worm Racing, written by Hyperobscura. Good morning, Tucker. How was your night?
Fine, I slept.
Good. Let's continue our interview, shall we?
Ain't got nothing better to do.
I guess not. You remember what we talked about yesterday? About Cliff and Lonnie?
Yeah.
Alright, let's just pick up where we left off. You told me they taught you the game?
That's right.
But you never told me how it worked. It's just worm racing, ain't it? It's a little more complicated than that, wouldn't you say?
Not really. You
pick out a worm, and then you race it against the others. And that's all.
Pretty much.
I don't know, Tucker. Seems like there's a lot more to it.
Well, you gotta train them. They won't crawl in a straight line unless you train them.
So how do you train them?
Just gotta poke them with something sharp. Gotta keep at it though. Might take a while. Hours. Days. Weeks. Sometimes.
Seems like a lot of work for a simple worm race, Tucker.
You gotta prepare them too, of course. Doesn't take too long though. There's a technique to it. Cliffy will tell you. He's good at that part.
Here's the deal, Tucker. I know you're full of shit. You know you're full of shit. So why don't we just cut to the chase?
Yeah, sure.
There's no such thing as worm racing, is there?
Sure there is. That's what we call it.
But they're not really worms, are they?
In the end, that's all they are.
So how does it work?
It's real easy, Detective. Lonnie will round them up 4, 5 at a time, sometimes more. She's good at that, Lonnie. They really take a shine to her.
I gathered as much.
Then we'll pick one each. I never go for the tall ones, personally. They're not used to being so close to the ground, you see. So I figure the shorter ones are better racers. Might be wrong about that one, though. I've yet to win a race. And then Cliffy prepares the ones we choose. He's good at that, Cliffy. Usually doesn't take him longer than a few minutes.
To do what?
To saw off their arms and legs. Worms don't have arms and legs, Detective. I thought you knew as much.
Jesus.
And then we get rid of the rest. Gut 'em up or something. Lonnie likes to hear 'em scream.
And then you fucking race them?
Nah. Gotta train 'em first. They won't listen if you don't train 'em. Poke 'em in the stubs, pour gasoline in the wounds, whatever makes 'em listen.
Fucking sick mother...
And then we race 'em. Winner gets to die.
And the losers,
they get to play another game.
What fucking game, Tucker?
Well, Detective, have you ever heard about worm fighting?
Driving in a Loop, written by Philis. I learned about loops when I went on a drive with my grandfather in his trusty old truck. Initially, we didn't realize it. We'd been in deep conversation about school, and it wasn't until we trailed off that I noticed the surroundings were disturbingly quiet. Our town was small, but still large enough that traffic noises were prevalent, yet not a single honk sounded. Even more strangely, no other vehicles passed us.
"Sam,"
Grandpa said suddenly, breaking the silence.
"No matter what you hear or feel, don't
turn your head. Keep looking forward."
Before I could turn, he quickly reached out and held my face so that I continued facing the front. From the way he sounded, he was doing the same. Something told me that I shouldn't argue. I watched as a road sign came up. Blackmore Drive. Despite the terse silence, nothing else happened for a while. I started getting bored, so I decided to speed read all the signs we were zooming by. Blackmore Drive. Wait, isn't this the third time I've seen it? Grandpa, this sign. I felt it then. Maybe it had been waiting for me to realize all along. A presence very close to my face. Unfortunately, peripheral vision filled in the blanks. A gaunt, gray, shriveled face was almost cheek to cheek with me. It had no body. There was no way it could fit in this tiny, cramped cab. For a moment, there was no movement. It was almost like the entity was reading road signs with me. Then it slowly started turning towards me. No,
Don't acknowledge it.
it was fully facing me. Its eyeballs were almost touching my own face. Yet I felt no breath blowing over me. I almost shrieked when something wet and slimy touched my cheek. Was this thing licking me? I decided I didn't want to know when I felt the slimy thing dragging up my face. I just wanted this whole nightmare to end. Next to me, Grandpa floored the accelerator. The entity gradually opened its mouth. Its jaw stretched wider than any human maw could, almost the length of my whole head, and it inched even closer. Razor-sharp teeth started digging into my scalp and chin. I whimpered. Just then, a horn blared. I jumped, but I never had been so happy to hear the sound of traffic. Noises returned around us. The painful pinpricks were gone. Vaguely, I noticed that tears had been running down my face. Before I could ask, Grandpa spoke.
Loops. You get into one, you just have to keep driving until you break out of it. My own grandpa taught me about this. You keep looking straight, and you never acknowledge them. That's the only way to get out alive.
He turned to me and smiled assuringly. I had to stop myself from screaming when I saw the angry red mark running from his jaw to his temple. My own face started to burn.
The Doctor. Written by luckysuperdonut. Just as the mad doctor's maniacal cackle sounded down the halls of his great castle, lightning struck the slopes of rock just west of his mountainside retreat. He had finally had his great revelation, and the laughter that escaped from him forced its way out from a deep crevice lodged somewhere near his lower intestine. Gurgling up from below his cockles, a sort of shrieking giggle began tremendously rising above the stiffened silence that was rich with anxiety. It began to take hold of him, wrenching his innards side to side in a rhythmic convulsion, heaving in greater waves until it felt like his ribs would explode from the pressure that was built up inside of him, and that he had been aching and waiting and screaming to get out. His was a deep and real laugh, one torn from his very being, a culmination of all that he ever was and would be. So compulsory that his body ached when his brain bothered to signal for another process. It echoed and reverberated around the darkened halls throughout his abandoned refuge, past the few rekindled candles that grasped after it, each bellow thicker and fuller than the last. It reached the corners of oubliettes, hidden in secret walls of dank cellars, several fathoms below the castle's surface, forcing the most hermetic rats to stir in curiosity or discomfort. The twisted facade of merriment burst over the ramparts, blasted down the cliffside, racing the boulders that tumbled down the cliffs in a maddening cacophony. It strained itself, the doctor stripped of agency, ripping his lungs and throat in an attempt to hurl itself into the great beyond, where history was the future and all that was wrong with the world was right. His was a righteous laugh, full of flavor and reality. His laugh that ripped through time and space, the elements themselves conjoined to shout with him, wielded the power of the very gods that never existed to strike down the hollowed earth itself as if to say, "You were right all along." As another blast from the heavens illuminated the doctor's decrepit, cratered face, his body writhed and contorted, burdened with the greatest feat he had ever experienced. The self-destructive force that had propelled him to research had now led to this, the one undeniable moment of objective truth, the fruition of his life itself manifested in this instant in his cachinnations amongst the halls of his own design. His was a true laugh. It was birth, it was dreams, it was the adjacency of the universe. A supernova obliterating his very essence from the inside out. The thick, slimy mirth that shook all who heard it, shook its creator to his roots, shook him to the ground and left him coughing, bleeding, dying. His last inhalation, a gasp vacuously clinging to the life around it, erupted in a final and violent chortle, eviscerating his organs. The vermin, witnessing his death throe, politely waited until it stopped before they began to feed.